President Trump and the Republican Party are preparing their pitches to voters ahead of next week's RNC. As CBS News White House correspondent Ben Tracy reports, the president and his campaign are preparing to tear apart the arguments made this week by Democrats and their candidate for president, Joe Biden.
In a Virginia ballroom today with no social distancing and very few masks, President Trump gave his review of the Democratic National Convention, which ended with fireworks over a Delaware parking lot last night.
The Democrats held the darkest and angriest and gloomiest convention in American history. Where Joe Biden sees American darkness, I see American greatness.
But in his acceptance speech, the newly minted Democratic nominee made it clear he thinks President Trump is the cause of that darkness.
The current president has cloaked American darkness for much too long. Too much anger, too much fear, too much division. I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I will be an ally of the light, not the darkness.
Biden also condemned President Trump's coronavirus response in simple terms.
Just judge this president on the facts. 5 million Americans infected by COVID-19. More than 170,000 Americans have died. By far the worst performance of any nation on earth.
The Republicans' convention kicks off Monday in Charlotte. President Trump is expected to be there as more than 300 delegates nominate him in person, and he's previewing new attacks.
47 years in Washington, 47 years of failure.
Tweeting out this ad calling Biden a failure, and once again making the unfounded claim that mail-in voting will lead to election chaos.
This will be the greatest catastrophe, one of the greatest catastrophes in the history of our country.
All right, so to discuss all of this, let's bring in Joel Payne and Leslie Sanchez. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and a Democratic strategist, and Leslie is a CBS News political analyst. Great to be with you both. Joel, the Democrats' convention appeared to go back and forth between criticisms of President Trump and policy proposals from a potential Biden-Harris administration. Do you think that was an effective messaging strategy, and did it get the base pumped up?
Well, I think it was effective, and really, I think that this convention can be judged by the 5 most important speeches, right? It's Barack and Michelle Obama, it's Kamala Harris, and it's Joe and Jill Biden. And I think they all hit home runs. It was all critically received very well. All of their pitches were both to unify the party, but also to bring in people to the Democratic Party that maybe were reluctant Trump voters, that maybe felt like there wasn't a home for them in the Republican Party anymore. All 5 of those speakers found ways to appeal to people in the middle through their speeches, and they talked values. They didn't, of course, they talked a little bit of policy and talked specifically about some things that they like to see done and that the president has failed at, but really they talked about values and vision. And I think that's why it was such a successful week of this convention, because I think those 5 people performed very well, and ultimately that's going to be what matters most.
Well, I want to follow up with you about that, Joel, because there has been a lot of reaction to First Lady Michelle Obama and President Barack Obama's speeches. How important was it for them to be in front of voters and in the way that they did? Very important. I mean, you have 2 of the most popular people in America. You have probably the most admired woman in the world, and Michelle Obama. You have a very popular 2-term ex-president who is still very much in the American psyche. Barack and Michelle Obama both understand how to compose an argument in front of a camera. We used them a lot in 2016 on the Hillary Clinton campaign, and I think actually we used them very effectively, maybe not enough in certain places. And they don't just appeal to African-American voters. I know that people like to settle on that and say that really it's just an appeal to amplify enthusiasm of African-Americans. That's important, but they also have a lot of capital in the middle. They have a lot of capital with people who are maybe reluctant Trump voters, right? Maybe people who are kind of sometimes Republicans, maybe Reagan Democrats. Obama used to call them Obamakins. They have a lot of capital with that group of voters as well. All right, Leslie, let's talk about those Obamakins that Joel's referencing, voters who cast ballots for Obama but then voted for Trump in 2016. How persuasive was it to hear from the Obamas again?
I mean, I would completely agree with Joel that they are the stars, the luminaries, and Kamala Harris was a very close second or third, I would say third, behind the Obamas, in terms of star power and interest among voters. But what's not said is that their favorables are higher than Joe Biden, that they were really lifting up a convention that needed that tremendous support. And correct, to point to the Hillary Clinton effect, it's hard to say just how much of a halo effect they're going to have on the campaign, but it was extraordinarily necessary. This is a campaign with Joe Biden that has been lackluster, that did not have kind of that excitement that you really needed moving forward. And it wasn't until everybody's minds crystallized because of the coronavirus that they moved in that direction to get behind one candidate. So the Obamas have been extremely powerful and important for the Democrats. They're very powerful for Republicans too, because many of the Trump voters feel that the reason they support Trump, an unconventional candidate, is because of the Obama administration and what they feel were significant weaknesses. They love the soaring rhetoric and the hope, but they feel that he did not execute when it came to defending America internationally, doing what he said he was going to do with the economy, immigration. You can go down the line.
Sure, we did hear a lot made about the coronavirus and President Trump's handling of the coronavirus and the appeal to voters for the BidenHarris ticket. But I think actually Democrats coalesced around Biden before the coronavirus really hit us full in the face, because I remember us being together watching as that all started to transpire. But Joel, to Leslie's point, Biden has faced a lot of pressure. He has had a lackluster early campaign. There's been questions about voter enthusiasm for him as opposed to against President Trump. And a lot of people have said that he isn't really the best public speaker. So did he meet the moment?
Oh, absolutely. By the way, Lana, you took me back. I remember when we were all together. Wasn't that a great time? I miss my friend Leslie. We all had such a great time together. Maybe one day again soon.
I know.
but to your point, Lana,
you're on that.
I think you're.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got us off
Joel,
track. But Lana, to your point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sorry, Leslie, do you
sorry,
want to
I messed that all up with our delay.
We get back into that.
We're all so excited, Lana. We're all so excited. But no, I would say Joel has made very important points about South Carolina, about Biden at that moment, about the African American vote, and how. But all of that was happening at the same time as the virus was starting to spread, and
it was starting at that point. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry, I'll get us back on track here. So my point about Joe Biden was going to be, yeah. Biden actually really, I think he met the moment the way he needed to. This was the most impactful speech of his career. And Joe Biden is not a polished public speaker like a Barack Obama, like a Michelle Obama. Frankly, he doesn't have the charisma of a Donald Trump in front of a crowd. But he was able to do what he needed to do in this moment, which was hit all the notes that the American people wanted to hear. A lot of people have really called that speech last night more of a presidential address. It almost felt more like a State of the Union. And I actually think, as opposed to the setting bringing the speech down, it actually elevated it because it was quiet and because there wasn't filled with pomp and circumstance in the room. I think it gave a certain heft to it that Biden was able to meet the moment.
Well, Leslie, I think you're absolutely right that it is hard to imagine a time before the coronavirus. It does seem like that has directed all of our politics and all of our discussions as of late. But you know what? We had been discussing how interesting it was to hear from so many Republicans or former Republicans at the DNC. I'm wondering if we're learning anything more about the impact of the decision to put that forward, especially as the Trump campaign is trying to paint the Biden-Harris ticket as socialists or extreme progressives.
What's fascinating, and it's the part of trying to dissect and unpack this, is the fact that despite all of that, a lot of people would like to say these never-Trumpers are people who are really disappointed, that's a soft word, in the president's leadership, and have decided to look at a Biden ticket, an establishment ticket, somebody they know what to expect. And many are really quite honestly strategically positioning 4 years after that. Who's the next GOPer in line that could really mount what they're used to in a traditional Republican campaign, a Republican platform? Where it gets interesting is that now this is clearly the Trump Republican Party. There is more support among Republicans for Trump than really gets a lot of media attention, and he's garnering and bringing big elements of the party together. So as much as we see these kind of flashes of disgruntled Republicans, and they are significant. I'm not going to discount like Project Lincoln or the names of any of the names of the national security advisors, people that have really kind of taken the president to task with his style, his leadership, and they have a whole list of complaints. But the people are looking at the contrast come November. What does the Biden-Harris ticket look like in terms of health care, getting the economy moving, getting children back to school, getting small businesses open again? They don't want to tamper down what they feel the minimal success or the success they've had so far and kind of learning to live under this pandemic. They want to move forward. They want to be optimistic, and they want to win. Right? We want to win against the virus. So that's where tone and messaging is going to be really critical next week, and to see how the president threads that.
Well, Leslie, I think you also made a really important point there, that Trump Republicans, Trump supporters are extraordinarily loyal, and they will listen to what he has to say. And we have heard from President Trump and Vice President Pence a reaction to the DNC. They've called it negative, very divisive. So how's the Trump campaign trying to spin what we heard from Democrats? And how does that jive with the president himself painting what seems to be a negative picture of Democratic cities out of control, calling COVID-19 the plague, his own negative storytelling?
Right. So the president's saying that these are external factors, right? That without, for example, the issue he's making, I stand for law and order. He wants to see cities, the law enforcement, I don't even know that he's gone far enough to make that case, but that he wants to see law and order instituted. He wants to see that healthcare, that people can protect their small businesses, that they can keep their own doctors, that they don't lose their personal health care. He wants to talk about those kind of elements in a much more aspirational way. And he's gonna bring up that fear factor again, saying that if we don't do this, this is what the alternative will be. So it is that, you're right, it is that balancing act of, it's not the Ronald Reagan shining city on the hill, but in many ways, it's interesting when you get out and you start talking to Republican voters. I had one on the phone, came to the inauguration. He said, I really wish there was another choice. But there's not, and I fear for what, mostly Harris was the person they were talking about. I fear for what a Biden-Harris ticket looks like in terms of what it does to my small business. Those are the kind of the real issues, and Trump has a very keen way of both that concern and revving up that engagement, and that's what he's going to be trying to do next week.
All right, Joel Payne and Leslie Sanchez, always a pleasure to talk to you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.